There you are, Theo. Honestly, late to your own dream. Do you even know where you are? Ah well, it's time we got you sorted out with these cards. Come on now, we haven't got all day. Oh, sorry about that. Just give that rewind button a tap and we'll see if we can't start walking around things instead of into them. If you ever find yourself in a pickle, just remember that you can take a step back and try something else. Now, give these a whirl and see where they get you. There you go! Remember, Theo, you can look around at any time. What's that just there? Maybe you should give it a peek. I wonder what that's doing sitting around here. Maybe you should keep your eyes open for other interesting things. You never know what you'll find. Well, we're done here. Go on, leap into your family's arms. Lauren and Nathaniel are waiting. What was that? Oh, okay. Well, after being woken unceremoniously by a sudden noise, our hero Theo felt that if he was to be kept awake, he deserved to know why. Although Theo felt the lure of sleep and the comfort of his bed, he really should go and investigate this ruckus. Hearing the yelling from the kitchen, Theo wondered if he had really moved from his bed just to listen to some tiff. Despite his efforts, Theo couldn't simply stay here forever. He had to find out what was happening. Ah, perhaps things were a little more serious than he'd thought. The kitchen seemed normal, except what was that he could see across the room? He had to take a closer look. God! Theo couldn't believe what he was seeing. His family, motionless on the floor. But that was it. No gun? Nothing at all? Was someone else here? As he turned away, Theo could only think about one thing. Someone was surely responsible for this, and he had to know who. Cautiously examining the hallway, Theo saw no signs of the killer. Instead, he found a path of destruction carved through strange machines before him. The deeper into the room Theo moved, the more he realized that something was amiss. That bright red light hadn't always been there, had it? Although he could not shake the image of his departed owners, Theo suddenly found himself somewhere very different indeed. However, before he could appreciate his new surroundings, he found his attention drawn to the glowing hot wall of energy in front of him. Faced with something so clearly hazardous, he thought it might be wise to take a moment to think before diving headlong into oblivion. Ah! Oh, what a pleasant surprise. After his daring maneuver, Theo found that he was still alive. Unfortunately, there was one more laser to slip past. Theo glared at the broken robot blocking his path. After risking his life twice, he was in no mood for this obstruction. Perhaps that broken vent offered salvation. Still somewhat tense from his previous trial, Theo was immensely relieved to find no deadly lasers when he emerged from the vent. On the other hand, he was instead faced with a functional, frantic, and quite soggy security robot. As he skirted by the distracted machine, Theo found himself eyeing the hole-riddled aquarium. Either someone was stalking the halls shooting at water features, or the security needed to work on their aim. Though the appeal of fresh fish was enticing, it was offset by the risk of an unexpected bath. Rather than contemplate such a terrible fate any further, Theo decided to make a quick exit. Advancing cautiously, Theo was encouraged by the sight of another aquarium, this time with the water safely inside, not threatening to unpleasantly dampen his fur. There was no time to fish, however, as security appeared to be taking its job a touch more seriously. Although Theo could be easily distracted, he knew when it was time to focus. That time had arrived. That time had arrived. Oh, for God's sake! Tearing his attention away from the unattainable, Theo delicately stepped between the broken remains of some very expensive-looking showpieces. Despite his lack of any understanding of fine art, he was disgusted by the wanton destruction before him. Having successfully weaved past the searching eyes of the guard, he was overjoyed to see that he could just follow the killer through a door, instead of crawling through the ventilation like a rodent. Theo cast his eyes about the grandiose room, the impressive decor marred by the smoking wreckage of robotic guards. Clearly, someone with no respect for interior design had been this way. However, hanging over the remains of a reception desk, Theo spotted something that took his interest. Bright Paw Industries. Although this place was impressive, Theo knew he had precious little time to admire it. Theo had many questions, but lollygagging wouldn't answer any of them. Theo was rendered immobile for a moment in amazement of his surroundings. Despite the damage, the underlying class of this Bright Paw establishment was clear. The placement of several large aquariums, brimming with exotic fish, was an inspired design choice that Theo could respect. Theo crossed the room, breathing in the intoxicating fragrance of fish, while taking care to avoid the remaining hazards. As he did, his mind began to wonder. Why was a place like this situated beneath his home? And more importantly, why had these fishy treats not been brought to his attention before? At first glance, it appeared that Theo had stumbled into a storage room for broken glass. Except there were other items in the glittering fragments. Grenades? Missiles? An umbrella?
Welcome
Theo padded behind the guard, pondering his discoveries. A hidden underground facility, robotic security, and now rooms filled with odd weapons. What on earth was this place? Is that a pair of heavily weaponized glasses? Ahem. Probably best to ignore it and carry on.
Did you know there are 279 different layers of untold mysteries in your hands?
Looking back, Theo considered that it was perhaps unwise to leave such destructive toys lying around. On the other hand, there was no way someone would leave live explosives on display. Probably best to ignore it and hurry on. Theo contemplated the ruins of the once magnificent boardroom, which had been reduced to little more than burnt mahogany by some kind of explosion. Apparently, the killer had needed to clear the room in a hurry. But why? Oh, perhaps those lasers were a motivator. With the wall of death slowly advancing, Theo scrambled for a plan to slip by. There, across the room, a shattered glass wall offering a glimpse of escape. Deftly avoiding glass with his paws, Theo found his eyes drawn to a large portrait on the wall. Was that Nathaniel? As he stood, he wondered, how much of all this was his master responsible for? Someone had clearly been rifling through the deliveries recently, though they didn't seem to have found what they were looking for. Obviously, the killer had been looting the facility, and it was unlikely that they planned to use volatile weaponry to spread peace and joy. Being a conscientious cat, Theo knew it fell to him to put a stop to the killer's nefarious activities. Finding himself inside a warehouse, the towering stacks of crates gave Theo some measure of hope. Perhaps the killer would try to search the top of an unstable pile and fall to their doom. Lost in daydreams of the killer being buried alive, Theo stepped blindly forwards onto a conveyor belt, promptly shuffling him away from his happy thoughts. Perhaps it was unlikely that the killer would be ended by fallen cargo, but the belts leading into the dark and deadly machinery seemed to promise an untimely demise. Spotting a bundle under some nearby crates, it appeared Theo's wishes had been heard. However, he tempered his excitement until he could get a closer look. Theo tempered his excitement, he didn't lose it. Stepping over a broken belt with great care, he was disappointed to discover not a body, but simply several empty crates bearing the label High Explosive. The empty crates led Theo to conclude three things. The killer had found what they were looking for, they were definitely up to something, and Theo's work was not yet done. He moved on with the hope that the killer's loot would be enough to slow them down. Theo pondered the erratic crusade of the robots as they fired at non-existent threats. Perhaps the killer had just passed through? The belt, unable to tell the difference between a cat and a crate, and lacking the desire to learn, moved him once again as it would any other box. As he headed for the door, Theo couldn't shake the feeling that the strange blue algae was creeping steadily across the wall behind him. Oh well, it was probably harmless. Whoever Theo was following had certainly spooked these poor robots who were all consumed by blind panic. As he carefully padded forwards, avoiding lasers, Theo noticed the most curious drawing etched into the wall. But why would a killer stop to doodle? Theo couldn't stop thinking about the bizarre graffiti he kept seeing. It was unlikely the killer was taking the time for artistic creativity. Was someone else in the facility? As he stepped into the room, Theo found his racing mind halted by yet another drawing of a slightly more significant scale. Theo tried his best to examine the etching, but found it devoid of artistic value. A for effort, he supposed. As he began to move away, Theo couldn't help but wonder who would put so much effort into these acts of vandalism. Was it maybe some kind of poorly drawn calling card? Perhaps, he thought as he carried on, the murderer was simply an awful artist. Whatever it was, the mural failed to hold Theo's interest long enough for any meaning to be gleaned. According to the booming sounds of heavy industry and the massive shipping containers, Theo had found himself in some kind of loading station. Theo's eye was caught by something colourful and clearly out of place hanging from a rail across the room. A discarded tie. Was this some kind of taunt? It was becoming clear to Theo that the large boxes wouldn't just wait for him to cross, so he quickened his pace towards the infuriating clue. Clearly the killer had left this tie to send a message, but in doing so they had left a trail for Theo to follow. Perhaps he'd get the better of them yet. Though he was intrigued by the surprisingly expressive train waiting before him, on the other side of the tracks, a curious hole in the wall drew his eye. Perhaps the killer had made their own exit. Stepping onto the train, Theo glanced towards his goal and noticed a strangely carefree-looking robot bumbling around near a control panel. Hopefully this one wasn't a threat. The train began to quake, and Theo couldn't react fast enough to leap off. He had better find something to hold on to. Theo was quite unprepared for the sudden velocity and found his current predicament extremely upsetting. Luckily, he just needed to hold on until the train looped back to the station. Rocketed past him, Theo pressed himself against the train and vowed to dedicate the rest of the ride to keeping his eyes open for low-flying objects of feline destruction. he could do to just keep his paws on the ground! Distract him from his efforts to survive! Just about spot the station! Approaching at a rapid pace! He just had to hold on a little longer! Theo staggered off the train quickly, driven by his newfound appreciation for solid ground and the terrible fear that it might suddenly set off again. Just ahead of him, he could see that bloody robot that had sent the train off in the first place. As he followed the irritating machine through the jagged opening in the wall, Theo hoped that he wouldn't ever have to lay eyes on it again. Theo eyed his new surroundings curiously, noting the piles of unused tiles and pipes. Across what little floor existed, there was a sharp drop, from which a blinding light and tremendous heat emanated. Besides this abyss sat... that bloody robot. Theo firmly averted his eyes from the robot and simply pretended that it did not exist. Apparently, pretending took all of his focus. Theo focused on the path ahead, choosing to politely ignore the annoyance in the room. A shifting wall of energy was barring his progress. Perhaps turning off that strange machine would help. The odd humming technology clearly had something to do with the barrier in his way. Though he understood simple cause and effect, Theo decided to wait and see if the generator would turn itself off. With the barrier successfully disabled, Theo was happy to move on and leave that robotic liability behind. Surely the killer couldn't be too far now. Entering another area with limited flooring, Theo wondered why all of these rooms seemed so unfinished. Maybe the... It was starting to look like Theo might have a tail. No pun intended. Oh, apparently Theo's new friend had some value after all. Theo regarded the newly risen barrier and wondered just how the robot had managed to cause this latest setback. As the oblivious robot scampered over an obvious switch, Theo braced for the consequences. When none presented themselves, he decided to stay on alert. There was no way he was safe while that machine was bumping into things. Contemplating the state of the room ahead, Theo reluctantly accepted that perhaps the robot's help might be necessary. As he threw a disparaging glance at the machine, Theo noticed some worn writing on his chassis. D4Z. D4Z. D4. Da Z. Da Z. Daz. Ooh, Daz. Daz isn't bad. Big D. Nope. Definitely Daz. As a loud noise reverberated behind Theo, he wondered just what he had done to be cursed with a trundling mishap. Though his companion seemed to be some kind of cosmic setback magnet, Theo had to admit, Daz was endearing, aggravatingly so. Overwhelmed by the heat pouring from the broken machine, Theo mourned the obvious failings of engineering safety standards. How on earth was he going to reach the elevators beyond this mess? Theo flinched when he heard the now familiar sound of Daz activating another switch. He cautiously opened his eyes and was pleasantly surprised to see something positive had finally come from this robot's help. As Daz hurried into the elevator, Theo found himself growing slightly less aggrieved. Perhaps having the little fellow around might even be useful. As the elevator rattled to a screeching halt, Theo found himself suspended on what could kindly be referred to as a rough and ready bridge, or not so kindly as an invitation to a long plummet to certain death. Theo watched as Daz leapt gracefully down onto the scaffold to aid in his journey across. Theo stared at him, shaming Daz with his steely gaze. Considering the barrier ahead of him, Theo wondered if Daz could assist him once more, with the right guidance, of course. Theo took a moment to brace himself for a potential failure on Daz's part. Theo found he quite enjoyed the company of the small robot when he wasn't actively annoying him. The unlikely companions set off into the cave, ignoring the tribal warnings decorating the entrance. They were probably just for show anyway. The large chamber was filled with the clanks and groans of tortured metal, punctuated by the steady drip of stagnant oil. Faced with a seemingly impassable split in the floor, Theo stopped to think of a way around. Wait, did he just... disregarding the danger, Daz bravely leapt into the chasm to aid his feline companion. Surely he'd be fine. No. stunned by the loss of poor Daz. Theo slowly padded onwards, barely noticing the more polished and functional walls around him. The only way to proceed seemed to be through a strange airlock. As he stepped inside and felt his hair begin to rise, he wondered if something was amiss. Huh? Ah! Ah! Well, thoroughly perplexed, Theo could only hope he wouldn't spontaneously burst into a cloud of electrons in the near future. Waiting around here was simply tempting fate. Despite the lingering crackles of energy in his fur, Theo found himself occupied with a rather spectacular plume of fire between himself and his goal. With nothing to hand to bar the flames and unwilling to risk singeing his whiskers, Theo was unsure of how to proceed. There must be something he could do. Amazing! It appeared that the mishap Theo had experienced had changed him in some fascinating ways. Before another jet of flame could spring up, Theo slipped deeper into the labs. Hopefully the worst was over, but if not, these newfound powers could prove quite helpful. Upon entering, Theo noticed there was a bridge leading straight to the door he needed. A definite positive. However, a large section had decided on a career change and was currently enjoying its new life as debris below. nothing in the face of those without strange abilities. Theo casually willed a path into existence. Theo quickly sauntered across his creation, hoping that physics wouldn't try to reassert itself at an inopportune moment. Although mocking gravity was a rare treat, he knew he probably shouldn't push his luck with the laws of nature. Well, Theo was certainly putting his new abilities to the test. Once again, Theo entered a laboratory which would have been quite easy to cross, if not for the disorganized heap of crates cluttering the corridor. It was always something. These delays were rapidly becoming infuriating. Yes! Finally! Theo rushed through the doors. No! No, no, no! What happened here? Christ! They can't all be ruined, can they? I built this equipment! I implemented failsafes! Surely some of them must have made it! Oh God, no! It's all gone! What am I going to do? I can't stay trapped like this forever! There's no way I'll be able to start again with things in this state! And it's not like you'd be able to help! You probably don't even understand what's happening right now! Oh God! Lauren! Oh, well! Whoever did all this to me was bloody thorough! Just look, Theo! All of my work, every scrap of progress, reduced to bent metal and shattered glass! Whoever did all of this had some training. I bet it was MI5. Or maybe those umbrella-swinging secret society ponces. It's just their style to break into someone's home and trash everything in the name of Queen and Country. The bastards! Christ! This hardware's supposed to be hard to damage! Well, lesson learned! Don't buy from the bloody Bratva! Strong Russians steal my ass, Koskov! All my work! My genius! And this is how it ends? I can't even do anything! I'm just along for the ride on the Theo Express! At least our chances of escaping here alive are minimal at best, so I won't have to suffer this joke of an existence for too damn long! Oh, I don't know, Theo. Maybe there's still a chance. We could escape this place and start from the ground up. Even with pause, we could try, and there'd still be viable samples on the bodies back at home. Maybe we could still save her. But it would take years starting from nothing. Even if we did manage to collect viable samples, we'd have no way of storing them for that long. And I never found the chance to make a backup of her mind. just can't believe she's gone. At least Joshua didn't get caught up in all of this. Who am I kidding? I'm not even me! I'm just a copy of Nathaniel's bloody mind squeezed into a brain the size of a tangerine! No offense, Theo. Honestly, it's amazing that we're both still alive in here at all. I've been hiding out in you for months without a body of my own. And when I saw him lying there dead in the house, I thought maybe I'd have my chance. Do you know what's really strange, Theo? The thing I miss most about having a body, more than anything else, is being able to wiggle my toes. It's bizarre. You'd expect something more grandiose, but it all comes down to the little things in the end. I would literally kill to feel a foot cramp again. Christ, watch out for those lasers, will you, Theo? Just remember, anything that happens to you happens to me. So this is all I am now? Just a disembodied voice in a cat. Well, it could be worse, I suppose. The earliest experiments were on lesser creatures. Could you imagine scurrying around here trapped in the body of a mouse? It doesn't bear thinking about. You wouldn't still be up for chasing down the killer, would you, Theo? I'll take that as a yes. Nothing like a bit of revenge to get the blood up. I must say, Theo, it is quite a relief to drop the pretense and just talk to you straight for once. I couldn't just be honest with you before, you understand? I mean, what was I supposed to say? Hello, Theo. Don't mind me, I'm just a strange voice in your head. Now be a dear and do exactly as I say. My God. Why on earth did I make the laser units so skittish? I can't believe I managed to make them so alert and yet so inept. What? That shutter should always be firmly sealed shut. Does this agent have no respect? No common decency at all? Get in there, Theo. I won't let this stand. I haven't been here in a very long time. Looks like the flora managed to thrive in my absence, but I can't say the same for the hardware. How on earth are we going to get around all that? Well, that'll do it. You know, I find it somewhat disconcerting how well you're taking to your new psychic potential, Theo. I can't deny its usefulness, though. I'd really rather not be back in this place. But if I will stop that damnable killer from making off with any more of my property, then I guess I have no choice. Ooh, I remember this one. Something about self-pollinating crops. Really, who needs bees anyway? These plants have had more than a decade to muddle up the wiring. Looks like it must have shorted out the last time someone used the door. We may have to perform some impromptu repairs, Theo. That didn't seem to be enough. Needs more power. Nicely done, Theo. We might make an electrician out of you after all. I was so young and idealistic when I made all of this. It's almost sad to see it in ruins. Almost. Ah, the old hydroponics nursery. Lord, that robot must have been keeping this room running for at least a decade. Have to respect the dedication, if nothing else. Do be careful around those panels, Theo. I don't think that robot has any safety accreditation, and you aren't exactly shockproof. Watch out for those plants, Theo. I know they either cure third-degree burns or cause them. I just can't quite remember which. Seems the easy way is out again. That vent over there might be an option, though. Lauren would have loved this place back in its heyday. I'm glad I kept her in the dark, though, considering how things turned out. I'm not sure what you're planning to do on this log, Theo. Ah! That's certainly an inventive use of your powers. Maybe a little warning next time, Theo. Just try to keep the acceleration within survivable limits, will you? Despite my growing disdain for vents, being a cat sure does give you a unique perspective on things. All this plant life makes it almost pleasant in here. You know, this is where it all started for me, Theo. Not the ventilation system, obviously, but the laboratory as a whole. I was trying to solve world hunger. Ha! Can you imagine? word of advice, Theo. If the government offers to fund your research, it probably isn't worth it. They always take more than they give. Unlikely to be relevant to you, but worth keeping in mind. Christ, this place is completely flooded. I suppose you won't want to set a paw in that. We'd best find a drier route. I don't like the way that robot is acting at all. It's just glaring at us. Good thing it can't get over here, then. Oh, this trick again. Give me a moment to brace myself. Ah! Now, why would you do that? Oh, bugger! Think the door need... Huh, that was quite crafty of you, Theo. Well, let's get out of here. More flooding. Looks like this exit's jammed up tight too. Let's try slipping through the ventilation again. Theo, it would appear that there's another robot over there, and this one might actually be able to catch us. I'm not sure you'll be able to outrun it. Oh Lord, it's going to be very close! Ha ha! Excellent, Theo! That should buy us some time at least. That was a little bit too close for comfort there, Theo. If we could avoid situations like that from now on, I'd really appreciate it. What on earth are they doing? You know what? I'm getting to the point where seeing my own robots destroying what I've made is old hat. I can't say the irony is lost on me, though. Even though I hate a lot of things about this place, there was a time when I had to fight to keep it alive. The money men were demanding results, and Joshua was on the way. Seeing the rusted ruin it's become is unpleasant. Well, the years have not been kind to this place. To think, back when this was a lab, I used to spend most of my time sitting in the middle of that hole in the floor.